Episode 7.
Holy Bros.
Let's go.
Hey. How we doing, my holy homie?
I like this. This is a good set, you know.
Yeah.
I like the dap and everything.
Yeah.
It's holy
Yeah,
homie.
that's our ritual.
It's iconic.
Yeah.
I like
it.
it.
Be iconic.
What are we talking about?
Today we're looking in 1 Peter.
Who wrote that?
Peter.
Who
Who
wrote
right.
it?
Do you think when Peter was cooking, like in the kitchen, and the disciples are in the other room, and Jesus is sitting there, and he's like thinking in the future, he's like, "Heh, can somebody smell what the Rock is cooking?"
Oh my God, John, that's really bad.
Jesus is just sitting there, and he's like, "Hey, what do you think Peter's cooking in there?"
What is Peter cooking? Fish.
Yeah,
He's cooking
definitely.
fish. He's a fisherman.
Yeah, fishers of men.
He's a fisher of men?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to like cut your ear off here with this conversation.
Oh, John, that one was
Peter
good.
cutting the Roman soldier's ear off.
When I think of Peter, I actually think of Avengers: Age of Ultron.
What?
No, because you know.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
You know when Ultron's like about to drop the whole city on everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no! It's when it's on the side where, like Ultron, he's like got Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and they go to get vibranium from the ship from Claw, and he grabs the vibranium, and you know what he says? "On this rock, I'll build my church." And it's like the scripture, Peter's the rock. You know, that's what I thought of. Put the Avengers sound right now. Bum, 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 bum. John.
That was a long rabbit trail for a really not great point, buddy. I love you, and I'm always gonna be honest with you. But
John, I thought it was really good.
yes, okay.
Okay, so
Okay.
what are we talking about? First Peter?
1 Peter,
Chapter 3,
yeah,
verse.
8 to, let's see if we can get to 11. You know,
Want to get into it?
we're gonna try and start like calming down with what we're talking about.
There you go. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
this one. The sad music rolls in, or like the
Yeah, cue
somber.
the piano music right here.
All right, let's start.
All
So if you want to turn to 1 Peter, chapter 3, verse 8. And it's funny, I told you earlier that my pastor was talking to Peter today.
I know.
And my friend was like, hey, because this was last week, and he was like, I was like, I really don't know what to talk about for the topic. And he's like, God's gonna provide. And then that day, or like next day, pastor was like, you guys really should read 1 Peter. So I read it, and then he talked about it today, and now we're talking about it today.
Nice. I mean, I think the whole Bible is important, right?
Yeah, it is not.
I'm sorry, whenever somebody says to me that, oh, you should read this, I'm like, yeah,
Right.
I will.
Right, yeah. You should read the whole Bible.
You should read the
That's-
whole Bible.
That's what everyone's
That's
saying.
just the response, you know?
Right.
All right.
You wanna read
Yeah.
verse 8, Joe?
Yeah, all right. 1 Peter 3, verse 8 says, and Gabe's going to put it up on the screen. So proud of your editing skills, buddy. Okay. Finally, all of you, be like-minded and sympathetic. Love one another and be compassionate and humble, not paying back evil for evil or insult for insult, but contrary, giving a blessing, since you were called for this, so that you may inherit a blessing. Should I continue in verse 10?
No, let's
Or
stop here.
let's stop here for a minute. So that's verses 8 and 9.
Right.
So it's interesting that Peter here talks about that we need to be like-minded first. So all pursuing the same goal.
Right.
You know, and what might that goal be?
Oh, my bad. John, that's really that's a good question. What
Putting you on the
might
spot.
that goal be? Yeah, you did get me.
See if he's paying attention.
I think we have a lot of goals as Christians, but I think the goal is to spread the gospel.
Right.
First and foremost, to like have people to be able to share Christ, and I think that's the universal goal. It's like, you know, what does Jesus say? Go into all the world and preach the gospel. I think that's our one goal.
Yeah.
But harmony that's good. The believers should be in harmony.
Right. And I think today you and I are in harmony because we have our church fits on.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
shout out
right.
to the church fit.
Shout out. Oh wait, hold on.
Looking
I got
trippy.
some church.
Oh, wait a minute.
I got
We
some
have
church-
some church
What?
merchandise for you.
Oh, holy bros, that's crazy.
No, you can get yours today.
You know, 2024. Go on our link tree.
Yeah.
Look on the back.
This is crazy. I thought I'd never be one of those people that interrupts their podcast for an ad.
This is our sponsor, Holy Bros Clothing Line.
We sponsored ourselves.
Hold on, let me throw this away. Bing. Alright. Great. Back to the
That could
program.
be your package someday if you order today.
John delivers it.
I don't.
John hand delivers all of
Because
our
I work for
packages.
UPS.
John works for FedEx, UPS, whatever you can to pay off the Beamer. All right. Harmony.
Okay, hold on. So, verse 8.
Yeah.
Peter points out a couple important points here. He gives us like 4 important points in this one verse here in verse 8. So I want to stay here for a second. He points out that we got to be in harmony with one another. Like that we have the same type of goal in mind. And our goal is to know our Creator, I think.
Right.
And also to share what we've experienced with others. You know, and that's like the good news. That is the definition of the good news.
Right.
You know.
Gospel. No, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and it's important. And I think there's also like, it's a really good atmosphere when people are all like of one mind. Like,
Right.
it's interesting when like you look at like construction workers or architects, and it's like when they all come together on a build, like they can make these tall skyscrapers, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like because they're all in one place, they're all in harmony,
That was a good point.
right?
That's
You
a good
see?
point.
You see?
Yeah, I saw where he was going with that.
John
I
was like,
that
"Oh,
was a
on
good
top
point,"
of this."
you know.
So that's
because
how
I
we
think
should be.
it could be like this. You know, God's trying to build this building.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that is His church, and like sharing the word with people who can have a better life with the information that you have, basically.
Right.
So if we're like the construction workers with the gospel, we can't be trying to build ourselves a room in that building. We have to be focused on building the overall building. And I think that's almost in some ways what Peter's talking about here. And that's why he's the foundation for the church in some ways.
Like
that he's-
Ultron.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in verse 8, Peter talks about how we all need to be like-minded. And being like-minded, we have to build that building like you're saying. Like we're the construction workers, and what you have is the good news to help get more construction workers to come build this building.
Right.
We can't, instead of trying to get more people to help, we can't build our own room here. We have to be focused on the overall project. And if you're not, that's what happens sometimes with some of us that are called, is we lose sight of the overall purpose. And we stop building the overall building and start trying to build a nice little room for ourselves. And I think that's what Peter's trying to say here to us, is that when we're all focused on one thing, we can be more powerful together for God's glory and furthering His kingdom.
Right. And then even like when you read, again, I'll read it. Finally, all of you should be of one mind. Sympathize with each other, love each other as brothers and sisters. Be tenderhearted and keep a humble attitude. It's just verse 8. He also says like love each other as brothers and sisters. And I think we've said it here before, that we're like the hands and feet of Christ. And sometimes, you know, it's hard to deal with people. But when you look at it as like, for instance, the construction worker thing, it's like, you know, you need a bunch of construction workers to build this building. And you can, you just gotta love each other. And it brought me, I wrote a note down, in Acts, it's chapter 2, verse 44, and it talks about every need in the church being met. it's like the believers were all together, they were living together, and whatever need anyone had, they would take care of it. And I think that's somewhat of what Peter alludes to, is that we should be of one mind, we should have the same goal in mind, we should be able to take care of each other and to love each other. And then he goes on to say, be tenderhearted and keep a humble attitude, right? So all of these things so far is directions to have good relationship with people. You know what I mean? And how important is our relationship with people?
Right.
Because we're around them all the time. And as Christians, we're supposed to be ambassadors of Christ and who he is. And so it's like, that's a part of the job description. If you're a construction worker, you're dealing with people and you're building a building.
Right. So I think what you just said is exactly right, that we have to, in some ways, Peter's bringing out the responsibility that each of us has to care for one another. And we don't, obviously, as humans, like the word or the action of being responsible. But in some ways, it is our job, you know, as understanding the good news that you have in your life, that we get all excited and joyous about. We're as much, if not more, responsible to share that with others. And I think that's what gets lost, is that we get so much excitement out of what we gain that we forget that it's not really love until you give it away. And I think that's something that is important to remember, that you have to give it away, or it's just something that you've created for yourself. And that's not what it was intended to be.
Yeah, the gospel is for people, you know what I mean? And time again, you see Jesus feeding the 5,000, and then he feeds the 4,000. It's like Jesus' ministry was about people, and his actions, it was all for people. It wasn't for himself, and it wasn't strictly for his disciples. And it's funny that you said, like, the love thing, too, is where I heard this story from my Bible teacher, and he was like, you know, there's this guy, he's a comedian, and he's an atheist. You might have heard this story. Have you heard this story?
No, but is it comedic that he's an atheist? Or that
No. He's a comedian and he's an atheist. It's just...
That's the funny part.
That's the funny part, is he's dumb. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But he was doing a show somewhere, and he finished it, and people came up to him. And this one guy came up to him, and he was like, hey, like, I really like your show. You're hilarious. And he was like, you know, I just want to tell you, like, God loves you, and, you know, I'm a Christian, and, you know, I know you're an atheist, but hey, take this card. And it was like church information on it. And the guy sat there, and he was thinking, and he was like, you know, I'm an atheist, and he's pretty firm in that. And he said, but if you're a Christian and you don't share the gospel, if you truly believe in your mind and in your heart that it's either you serve God or at some point in your life you're going to be separated from him. And if you strongly believe that, why wouldn't you tell everyone you knew? And he was like, and he kind of switches it on Christians, which, you know, is kind of convicting, is that he said, how much do you have to hate a person not to have the good news, to have the answer to someone suffering and not share it? And he was like, so I'm, you know, he's like, I'm an atheist, but I really appreciate that guy coming because it shows that he loves.
And I think part of it is that it's not real to us. You know, if we look at the severity of some other moments and examples that we can pick out, like if somebody's about to like die in a fire, you'd go tell them, right? But because that's real,
right?
You know, and we understand that concept being real. But in the same way, the wind moves and you see the effects, and then because you can see the effects, you know that there's wind. Okay, so follow me here. If we see the effects of God, but then don't take him as a reality that people don't know him, how much are we taking away from the severity of that situation that everyone needs to experience, you know?
Right. No, that's good. Oh, John, sorry, I get so surprised.
I'm surprised I got all that in like 3 sentences.
That's really good.
I didn't get to say my joke.
Say it.
But like, if you're around an atheist and they sneeze, are you like, what do you say? Bless you?
you're gonna be dirt one day.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Anyways.
What if he throws a tantrum? No! Don't
He'd
say
have
that.
a big bang?
Big bang.
Big bang you. Big bang bless you?
That sneeze must have been an accident.
Oh. Series of chemical reactions.
A series of chemical reactions made you sneeze.
Right. Yeah. Right.
The same chemical
Yeah.
reactions made everything we see.
Yeah. How come when you sneeze it doesn't create things? Pondering question for the atheist.
If you're an
Anyways,
atheist.
trick your atheist friends in one simple question.
I had a whole good thing to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
Dang it, John. Like, we can believe one thing in our hearts and like our actions not show that. So it's like, I've heard my pastor even recently said it. It's like, you may be a Christian, but are you living your life as an atheist? And what he means by that is like, you can say, I believe in God, I believe his promises are real, I believe in everything, but treat people wrongly, cheat people. And then my pastor always uses the example, if Jesus was to come back, like if you knew he was coming back tomorrow, how would you live your life today? And it's like, the answer really should be, I wouldn't change a thing. But most of the time, we would. Like I would, everyone that we saw, us going out, right? If I knew Jesus was coming back tomorrow, I would have told everyone at lunch, right? I would have,
Yeah, exactly.
everything. And it's like, I would have probably spent more time in prayer today. I would have sang these songs a little harder. And it's just funny how, like I said, we can say we believe one thing, but our actions show a whole nother dimension of our beliefs. And like you said, sometimes it's not real to us, but things need to become real to us.
While you were saying that, I was just thinking about what kind of prevents us from being able to do that sometimes. And it's weird, I just saw it this way, that sometimes because of how we act, we're scared that if we start telling somebody about Jesus or what he's done for you, that it might not reflect that because of how you act. So what I'm seeing is that when we act in the Spirit that God has created for you, and we've seen that through the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, patience, kindness, the list goes on. But if we act out of those things, it's going to make an opportunity for you to share what God has done for you.
Right.
And the good news in that. And that's awesome. I just saw that. But because of that, the Spirit reveals to you and encloses what he wants you to be and to act in that fullness. And so when you experience that, that's when it becomes real, because then you exert some of those characteristics and you share that with other people because it's real to you. And when that happens, it's just the reality of the life we live in and the social barriers that are present when you want to share something about Christ don't mean anything because you've experienced something so real and so earth-shattering that nothing can stand in the way of that. And I think that's awesome.
No, that is great. And like, just like you said, you need to, those qualities need to be active in your life. Like I can tell you about Christ, but if his love, his patience, his kindness, self-control aren't present in my life, it's not him that's wrong, but it's not gonna look real to someone else, right? It's like my error, and I think that's also what holds people back. Is like if you've made mistakes with certain people, it's hard for you to tell them about Christ because they haven't always seen you as the person that you are now. You know what I mean?
And that kind of just reminds me a little bit of the verse that, reminds me of two things. That in order for it to be real, we have to search for it in some sense. And that reminded me of the verse that Jesus said that ask and it shall be given to you, knock and the door will be open. So there's an active pursuit of this that allows it to be real.
Right.
So then on the other side of things, could it be that sometimes we don't knock and we don't ask and we don't actively pursue, and that makes it not real because we're not taking those steps to knock, to ask, and to spend time in prayer and reading that allows it to be real to us.
Right. You gotta want it. And when we want something, we are very push you with it. You know what I mean? For my car was messed up for a while, and the mechanic was taking a very long time on it. I was very like, rushy. I was like, like calling him every day, trying to figure it out. And that's how we should be with God. You know what I mean? As far as like, God, I want your presence today. I need your presence, and I need the gifts of the Spirit. And to also add what you were talking about earlier about like your character should win people to Christ. And earlier in 1 Peter, he's talking, actually it's a marriage thing, but we can apply it here. He's talking about wives who have been saved and their husbands are not Christians. And he says, submit to your husband, but also you need to show him the love of Christ. So it says that when you're serving your husband, let the good character of Christ be shown to you and let that minister to him. So in the same way, it's like our compassion, Christ in us, should minister to people. You know what I mean? So that's
Exactly. Now, your character should show something about what you believe.
Right.
And unless that's real and you're actively pursuing it, then how can we share something that's not real to us than to somebody else? A message I gave a while back at my church on a Wednesday night, I had this example where I just gave somebody in the audience $1, and then I said, give that $1 to somebody else. And the point of it was that it was pointless, because what I didn't share was that was my last $1. And what we do when we're trying to share the gospel sometimes and share the good news that you are saved and that you can be made whole, is that we don't give the importance to what we're giving because it's not real. Mm-hmm. And unless we understand what we're giving, then it can't be impactful, And I always love that example because God knows I can come up with a more complicated example and try and use it, but because of the simplicity of it, it shows that we don't always share the impact of what we're doing and what we've experienced. And when there's a lack of that, it doesn't attest to our character or what God's done in us. So
Right. I mean, how can you sell something you don't believe in, right? It's like,
yeah.
I heard, like, don't ever buy something from someone who doesn't have that product themselves, right? So it's like, I don't know. I think it's almost impossible, very difficult for me to sell something to you that I don't personally use, you know what I mean? Like my phone, like I use my phone every day. If I don't have a phone, how am I gonna sell someone a phone? You know what I mean? It's just in simplicity, just like you said, like if it's real to you and you believe it, someone's gonna take the importance. And we have a whole nother, like I feel like, brand of Christians that don't appreciate the gospel and appreciate the Bible for what it is. And that's partly because the delivery of people who don't really believe in it themselves aren't putting importance on what this message is,
So to kind of summarize, we'll definitely do a part 2 of this episode. So verse 8 shows us that we have to be united in our thinking, and that we have to understand what Christ has done for us in order to share it to others. And in that building process, don't get distracted to try and build something for yourself, because that's going to just end with you getting fired off that construction job, and not having a building, so to speak. That's a very complex analogy, but I'm saying that when we are in God's calling and we're operating in it, that don't get and fall into temptation to start promoting yourself above God, because He deserves all the glory, not some of it, but all of it. And when that happens, life's going to come at you a lot faster. There's an example of, I think it's King Solomon, that God took his hand off of, his spirit off of him, and then he was like haunted by spirits or something. And that's where David comes in and starts playing the harp for him. But the point is that let God's hand be upon you by keeping your focus on Him. Mm-hmm. And through that, we can grow and have a bigger impact for Him.
I mean, yeah, through that, even the story, I forgot what king it was, but he had built this huge kingdom. And he was looking at it one day and he said, look at this kingdom. I built it all. This is so like crazy and majestic. And from then on, he lost his mind. And he was like running to the wilderness. And it was until he gave the glory to God that he was back. So he was warned, like, you're being prideful, right? You're taking everything that you see and saying that this is a work of my hands. So he's warned about it, but like us, we don't heed warnings. And eventually he got to the point where he was in the wilderness. He was acting like an animal, essentially. And once he finally thought and said, actually, no, glory be to God, and that's when everything changed.
Exactly. So we're going to wrap it up with these 2 points. So the last 2 points we want to talk about are in verse 8, that Peter calls us to be compassionate and to be humble. And those are 2 very complex characteristics that we have to exhibit here.
Right.
One, I'll talk about being humble and then we talk about compassion. Something in my life that I've seen is people don't tend to take me as a humble person, and I don't really understand that sometimes. So then I have to therefore humble myself to try and see what they're saying. And I think that's always a very humbling experience, but sorry. Anyways, I had to say that. But with that, it's being humble. I was thinking about it one day, that it's like through Christ, he saved us, obviously. We're all seen in the image and likeness of God, and the sons and daughters of God. And with that, we all have value. And understanding that can lead to humility in yourself, because no one is greater than anyone, through the sense that we're all saved and we've all fallen short of God's glory. Right. And that even if he's using you to some degree, that we have to stay humble in that. Because then if we're not being humble, we're being prideful. And let me tell you, the biggest material to start building your own building in that grand skyscraper that God's trying to build is pride. And when we try and be prideful, it prevents us from focusing on the overall goal in our lives, and that's to glorify God. Because then we start promoting ourselves and trying to build our own wall. And so being humble allows us to keep the focus on God.
Pride is like cutting corners on your building.
Yeah. And we don't want to cut the cornerstone, because we know the cornerstone.
Cheap foundation, cornerstone.
Yeah, because Jesus was the cornerstone.
Jesus is the cornerstone. But I mean, compassion. When I think about any concept, I automatically try and apply it to Jesus, and compassion. And I think Jesus is an excellent example for almost everything, but compassion all the more. I mean, you see all throughout the Bible, Jesus looked at this person and had compassion. And we've talked about it, but I want to go back to like the woman caught in adultery. Like, in that sense, she was caught in this awful situation, and these people are ready to kill her. And Jesus, again, writes in the sand, does all that. But by the end of it, he gets up and he has compassion on her. He doesn't beat her over the head with his hand or stone her, because he's the only one who could have. But he says, just go and sin no more. Woman, where are your accusers, right? And so having compassion is so important, and it's seeing people as how God sees them. And once you see people with love, and once you see them as, like you said, creations of God, it makes having compassion so much easier. And I think the lack of compassion is due to people not seeing their brothers and sisters as God sees them. Because if I don't see you as an equal to me, or if I don't see you as even anything, then I'm not going to view you as something good. But it's when I go into the Bible and I see that God has a destiny and a purpose for you, when I see that God is calling for you, that when you got saved, all of heaven rejoiced. And it's when I see that, I can say, hey, John messed up once, I got compassion. I John messes up all the time. But I still love him, and it's just having that compassion that when people mess up, you still love them, and you're there.
You know what that reminds me of?
What does that remind you of?
The unfailing love episode that we did.
Ooh, that's a good callback. I love that
Because we
episode.
can't just give up when we mess up, because God's called us to be, this is a weird concept, but to be compassionate on ourselves too. Because a lot of times when we mess up, we think we're no good, and then that prevents us from experiencing what God has for you. Because God says thoroughly through the Bible that there is no condemnation when you believe in Christ. And if you just, instead of being in that self-pity, in that deep pit of what you've done, that if we can keep the focus on being in Christ and knowing the goodness of the Savior, that there is no condemnation. God does not condemn you for when we fall in sin, because there is forgiveness, because He is compassionate.
Sometimes the only thing holding you back from what God has for you is you, and that's usually what it is. And sometimes taking the step to, like we talked about it, forgive yourself. And it's like sometimes, God's already forgiven you. Sometimes you've talked to the person that you may have wronged, they forgive you. But if you can't forgive you, you're not going to move forward.
And I know we've said it before, but I love this point that when Judas betrayed Jesus, he allowed his self-sin to prevent him from being able to see the stone rolled away. But the awesome thing about the God we serve is that His character would have been faithful to forgive. And we have to realize that, because if Judas got over what he had done and came back to Christ to ask Him for forgiveness, we can't be in our right mind to think that Christ wouldn't forgive him, because God is compassionate and forgiving, because He knows we all will fall short of the glory.
Right.
And that Christ even knew before He even did it. He was like, I know you, I know what you're going to do, but He still allowed him to experience being in His presence. And I think that's awesome. So wherever you are today, just remember to be like that to others, and know that God's got that for you. So when you do mess up, that God's got compassion for you, and that when you return to Him, He's still faithful and compassionate to love you.
Right. I mean, 1 Peter is a great book.
We get a part 2 coming.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get a part 2 in, but if you can, honestly read it. It's really good example, and Peter writes very brilliantly on it, and I'm sure we're going to tackle more of it in the next episode, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, thank you for watching. And you guys got to watch that part 2. Promote it.
Watch part 2 coming out following week.
The following week, we'll do that.
Yeah, thanks for watching, guys.